wondered it was pebble and it was pebble.
18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11.
Welcome to Stories Steeped in Stone, Ghosts and Granite.
My friend Chris was once riding a bus home from Toronto back north to Sault Ste. Marie. He found himself seated next to a traveler from Germany. After exchanging pleasantries with the guy, Chris nodded off to sleep until he was started awake a few hours later at his fellow companion excitedly snapping pictures and looking out the windows. Puzzled, Chris looked for what had caught the Teutonic tourist's eye, but found nothing. Why the sudden interest? There are only trees. There's nothing here. No people, no houses, no anything. He said, delighted. Chris looked at him and shrugged. Yeah, well, get used to it. And he went back to sleep.
Leo Moore, ladies and gentlemen, who was giving us an interpretation from George Case, a local author from Sault Ste. Marie. And we'll hear from Leo a little bit later on this evening. Thank you, Leo. Thank you. Welcome. Bienvenue. Bonjour to our third Stories Steeped in Stone, and tonight's very special series and events being the Ghost and Granite. So my name is Lyne Gagnon, and I'll be your MC for this evening. I'm very pleased to be here. And before we go any further, I would certainly like to acknowledge that we are meeting here today on the Huron-Robinson Treaty territory of the Anishinaabe, Métis, and Inuit people. The series Stories Steeped in Stone, I am so glad that you are here with us today, whether it's here with us at the Discovery Center or virtually, actually throughout the world. We have people from New Zealand, from the United States, from everywhere. And what is so unique about this series of 13 performances is that not a single one is alike. Each and every one of them features some very local artists with their own unique talent, creativity, and they will bring to us heritage presentation every time, as well as stories either told to us through music, theaters, stories, performance arts. And of course tonight, it's Ghosts and Granites. Well, let's go and talk to Elizabeth Creith and to Ian Ganton, our two special guests this evening. Welcome. So glad to have you here tonight. And what we're going to do is, this is nice and intimate. So we are really nice. It's so nice to have the both of you here, from basically paleontology to archaeology. So there's the granite, there's the ghost. And we're going to start with you, Ian, this evening, our heritage presentation. So why don't you tell, first of all, doesn't he look just amazing in his Sunday best? Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that beautiful outfit that you're wearing for us today?
Well, they're work clothes, working when we are doing historical interpretations here at the Ermatinger Clergue National Historic Site. So combination of work and fine clothes of the 1800 era, Ermatinger time period.
Excellent. And looks like you just fit perfectly in this particular outfit. So Ian, tell us a little bit more about your inspiration for tonight's theme of Ghosts and Granites.
Well, it's related to the site that we're sitting on and the acreage around it, the old stone house, and the archaeology that is part of the telling of the stories steeped in stone, and the stories that shape this area and continue to be exciting for us to share with our guests and people from all over the world. We're excited and looking forward to people coming again and letting us share.
That's wonderful. Well, you know what? Let me invite you up to the stage, because we can't wait to hear a little bit more further about how it all began with the old stone house.
Great, thank you.
Big round of applause for Ian, please.
Oh, okay. Okay. Good evening. It is my honor to share some historical stories steeped in stone as they relate to the Ermatinger Old Stone House. For those joining us who are not familiar with this mansion in the wilderness, construction began in 1812 and became the house and home of fur trader Charles Oakes Ermatinger. He and his Ojibwe wife, Mananawe, who he called Charlotte, and their young family first settled in this area on this spot by the St. Mary's River in the Sioux in 1808. Because of the importance of our house and the stories of national significance associated with the many residents and visitors, archaeology is an important aspect of our research here on site. Archaeology, the study of our past through material remains and recording of tangible resources. These material remains lead us to research other historical background references, in that we can compare and conclude regarding the many ghosts and granite, or as we like to say, stories steeped in stone. And as I will detail, stories revealed from the earth and the soil. As a National Historic Site, we have had 3 archaeological studies performed on site. First, 1974 by Patty Reed on the specific site of the summer kitchen. That one was the largest of the 3. Second, 2011 by Woodland Heritage Services on the specific site of the Heritage Discovery Center. The third, 2021 by Woodland Heritage Services again, this time around the foundation of the Old Stone House. The 1974 archaeological study. Now, the primary goal of that project was to uncover traces of an out kitchen reported to have burned some years prior to 1844. The evidence for that existence of that structure consists of a letter by a gentleman by the name of Bellender in 1844, and George Caitlin's 1836 depiction of the area with the Ermatinger dwelling possessing an addition in the rear. The second goal was the recovery of artifact assemblages representing the various occupations of the house so that cultural influences could be drawn, lifestyles reconstructed, and historical documents collaborated or corrected. A representative sample of these artifacts would then form the basis of new displays within the Ermatinger Old Stone House. Now, the third, but by no means less important goal, was the stimulation of public awareness of archaeological resource and its importance to both local and indeed national history. An area behind the house was gridded and a test trench was made. Then all subsequent excavation was directed towards uncovering the entire stone structure first encountered, totally by surprise. All back dirt was screened through 1/4-inch mesh, and during the process is when small artifacts began to be revealed from the soil. As more dirt was removed, more artifacts were found, and greater portions of the stone structure, foundations, were uncovered. The structure found was identified as the jury rooms. Related to the time period, the house was used in part as the first courthouse and residence of our first sheriff. It is known that that building was erected between 1855 and 1862, based on data already present, and that it was no longer standing when the 1888 survey of Sault Ste. Marie was completed. The jury room, possibly the site of jail cells for the courthouse, It contained the foundation ruins of a fireplace, post molds, and sections of a field stone floor. The area excavated uncovered more than 16,000 artifacts, of which over 12,000 were pre-1800, and many dating back to the Ermatinger era, 1808 to 1828. Categories of artifacts included ceramics, glass, metal, household and personal artifacts, builder's hardware, coins and tokens, military, trade and weaponry, Aboriginal artifacts, and miscellaneous artifacts, in addition to unidentifiable items and scrap metals. During the 2011 and the 2021 archaeological studies, very few artifacts remains were uncovered, actually one or two. Now, during the 2021 survey, a small shard of china was found in the soil beneath one of the dining room windows of the present and Ermatinger times. This piece. Of all three studies, one material item continues to be found, which provides us a lot of evidence to conclude the status of the Ermatinger family and their ability to acquire the finer things in life, the blue willow china. At a time, it was important to Charles Ermatinger to extend his hospitality to those he did business with. Invitations to the Ermatingers' annual caribou dinner were eagerly sought by the traders and the settlers. Invoices made out to Ermatinger during his residence in the house show that he dined in style. He ordered full sets of mulberry print and blue-printed dinner dishes, popular throughout Britain and Canada at the time. We continue the traditions as we serve you with blue willow china.
Thank you so much, Ian, for this really wonderful presentation. I don't know about you, but I've learned a lot already. Every time. It's such a wonderful experience to be able to learn from all of you about the very site that we're on. Excellent. Thank you, and we will bring you back a little bit later on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Barb. Well, let's go back and join Elizabeth Creith once again. Elizabeth, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great.
Wasn't it just amazing?
It was, yes.
So we were talking a little bit earlier on tonight, and you are really treated this evening because not only are you being able to eat from the very prestigious dining service on the blue dishes, there's also some rocks. And perhaps you can tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, all right.
Tell us about it.
They are rocks, sort of. What you have on your table are fossils. There are trilobites, goniatites, which are a kind of coiled up sea creature like a nautilus or an ammonite, and also mosasaur teeth. So let me just give you some context for age. The mosasaur teeth are actually pretty new. They're not more than 65 million years old. The trilobites are all at least 250 million years old because all trilobites died out in the Permian extinction 250 million years ago. So I know they're old things, but enjoy them. I want you to be able to handle them. I wouldn't suggest you lick the rocks, although fossil collectors always do. But just handle them, look at them, think about how long they've been around and how short a time we've been around, comparatively speaking.
And can they take them home?
They absolutely can take them home. If you fight over them, I expect you to be civilized. Does everybody here know how to play rock, paper, scissors? Okay, well, you're not going to be playing that. You're going to play fossil, trowel, or paleontologist. Okay? So the fossil obsesses the paleontologist. The paleontologist wields the trowel digs up the fossil. You figure out who wins.
Well, you know what? I think that this is a great time for us to just bring you center stage so you can tell us more about this evening's poetry in motion, really.
Oh, okay, sure.
And we'll talk some more after that.
Absolutely.
Please welcome Elizabeth Creith.
My knee's also obsessed paleontologist, just saying. Algoma has a history that goes back to before the European settlers, before the First Nations, before human beings existed. Let's go back further, before there were vertebrates, before there was anything living on land, in fact, before there was anything living at all. There is a history here, and it's visible in the rocks. So what I want to do tonight is take you on a journey through that history. Now, some of it happened when here wasn't actually here, because the continent of North America didn't always exist. It was once part of a huge supercontinent called Pangaea, which means the whole Earth. And eventually Pangaea split up and drifted apart to form the continents that we recognize now. So some of the things that happened in Algoma didn't happen here on the globe, but they happened here. Wrap your head around that one. I like rhymed poetry and classic forms. In this suite, you'll hear a villanelle, a sonnet, rhymed couplets, which were popularized by Geoffrey Chaucer, a literative rhyme, which is kind of beginning rhyme. People think of rhymes as end rhymes, but beginning rhyme is when the words start the same rather than end the same, and that's the oldest form of rhyme in English. I also have another piece of poetry form by Geoffrey Chaucer called Rime Royal. So I'll tell you what you're listening to before I start. This first one is a villanelle, and if you were to drive east and look to your left about 3 kilometers before you get to Deborah, you would see a rock wall about 12 feet high, and it's rippled like this. That rock wall was once at the bottom of a shallow sea, and that one happened in Pangaea. That piece of fossil, and it's the biggest one in my collection. I want to say it's mine, but I share. So please feel free to touch my fossil. That happened when this was part of Pangaea. This is a villanelle. It's called Ripple Rock. 2 billion-year-old ripples run and lift and shift the grains of sand beneath a younger, hotter sun, when no life had as yet begun to root or sprout, to swim or stand. 2 billion-year-old ripples run in shallow seas from comets won, from strand across to barren strand, beneath a younger, hotter sun. In lines unread by anyone, rolled by the winds the planet fanned, 2 billion-year-old ripples run. The oceans dried up, one by one, transforming seabed to dry land beneath a younger, hotter sun. Their ocean eons long since done, now set in stone the ripples stand. 2 billion-year-old ripples run beneath a younger, hotter sun. Thank you. So that's the farthest back I'm going to go. The next thing is something that happened in Sudbury, or where Sudbury was going to be, about 1.8 billion years ago. At first, we thought that it was a meteor strike. Something hit Sudbury, and for a long time we believed it was a meteor. Now, evidence seems to suggest that it was a comet. Meteors travel a relatively straight line, and comets a hyperbolic curve. So it's important that comets have to line up precisely with our orbit in order to hit us. That's why it happens so seldom. It's easy to miss us, we're moving. But the other thing about comets is they're big, dirty ice balls. So we believe that all of the water on Earth arrived in comet strikes, and that if we hadn't been hit by comets, we wouldn't have water, because when the planet formed, it was big, hot masses of rocks slamming together, and no water could exist under those conditions. We also believe, and very, very recently found some confirmation, that the building blocks of life arrived from outer space. So Joni Mitchell was right. We're stardust. Okay, so this is, what form did I use for this? This is the alliterative verse. It's called Comet Strike. The world, the wise say, is of fire and air, water and earth, 4 elements made. A comet, by chance, curved out of the cosmos. A fire with friction, it fell here in flames, crashed into the crust and created a crater, melted the rock, made it roll out in ridges, a shock wave that shattered and settled in shape. This wayfarer brought us the blessing of water and 4 other elements earth to make fertile, seeded, and growing. Cytosine, guanine, adenine, thymine, all life from these things. A fortunate start that fell from the stars. Now where our roads run, the rock walls remind us of when heaven hurled down our happenstance life. Thank you. So life began in the water, and it may be interesting to you to know that a lot of things that live in the water look like plants but aren't, because there were no plants. There were animals first. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it's true. First there were animals, later there were plants. So all the things that lived in those shallow seas were animals. A lot of them still survive till today. We have sponges. We have a kind of invertebrate called a bryozoan. It's a colonial animal like a sponge. We have sponges, we have corals, but there were also other animals that did not survive. We do find traces of them, but they don't live here anymore, and we don't understand because they were so numerous. Those of you who have trilobites on your table are looking at some of those that were everywhere, and now nowhere. There's none of them. So this is a sonnet. It's called Devonian Seas. This limestone face was once a coral reef where crinoids swayed and drifting ammonites soared over trundling trilobites and jawless fishes in numbers past belief. And what remains now? Nothing but the trace they left behind of shell and stalk and bone in static pose, immobilized in stone, a faded picture of this vanished place. The armored things have gone into the night, the long night of extinction, where we all must go at last, as our forebears have gone. And yet, in tropic seas, swaying in the light, warm ocean currents where the sea cliffs fall into the deep, the sea lilies live on. Okay, so we're going to skip a little time here because I really like dinosaurs, and we did have dinosaurs. We just don't have any fossils of them. We have the wrong levels for fossils. All the fossils that we have here are Devonian, Silurian, or Ordovician, which were all about 315 million years old or older. And so dinosaurs were later than that. And I'll tell you later why we don't have any of those fossils. But the fact that we don't have evidence of them being here really doesn't mean that they weren't there. It means that we have no evidence that they were there. So we're just going to lighten up a little bit because dinosaurs once ruled the earth, but heck, now they're plush toys and plastic models and irritating television characters. So why shouldn't we have a little fun with them too? Let's talk about the Brontosaurus. He has this big long neck, which apparently he did not use like this. It was, his tail and neck were counterweights for each other, so when he browsed like this. He probably couldn't even raise his neck that high. So, Brontosaurus. When Brontosaurus browsed at ponds, he stripped the cycads of their fronds. His jaws could open very wide, but couldn't move from side to side. He couldn't chew to save his soul and had to eat his veggies whole. But not to fret, the thunder lizard had something like a chicken's gizzard. His stomach ground his food up with his stomach stones called gastroliths, and piles of these, warm, smooth, and round, lie where the Bronto's bones are found. Does everybody have a favorite dinosaur? Am I in the right crowd to ask who has a favorite dinosaur? Who has a favorite dinosaur? Plesiosaurus? Wow. You really need to go to Morden. You need to go to Morden. They have plesiosaurs and mosasaurs and all kinds of things. Mine, when I was a girl, was the Stegosaurus. Now, the Stegosaurus, does anybody know, except you, David, you're not allowed to say, does anybody know what the 4 spikes on the Stegosaurus's tail are called? Nobody? Pop quiz and you're all, oh, okay. Okay. It's called a thagomizer. And it's because of a Gary Larson cartoon where Gary, who frequently broke biological rules, showed a caveman with a drawing of a Stegosaurus, and he's pointing to it and lecturing a bunch of other cavemen. He says, this part here we call the thagomizer in honor of the late Thag. And who says scientists are humorless? Because the paleontologists were right on this. That is the thagomizer. It is called the thagomizer, okay? So, Stegosaurus' brain is small. He can't think very well at all. His body's propped on stumpy legs. His nails are blunt. His teeth are pegs. His armor plates stand tall and wide, but don't protect his back and sides. He seems on any given day to predators an easy prey. But when he swings his thagomizer, he leaves them sorer and much wiser. So the raptors, because everybody loves the carnivores, right? Who's your favorite? T-Rex, it's always T-Rex. We have learned so much about raptors recently, for example, that they were not stupid, vicious animals, that they were quite smart, had a social behavior, that they probably lived in family groups, looked after their young, and had feathers. We found a lot of evidence, actual physical evidence of feathers on fossils, particularly coming out of China. And even we found some evidence of what colors the feathers were. So some of these guys were really spiffy looking and pretty fluffy. And what you ought to know is that all the cool dinosaurs died when the comet hit, but not all the dinosaurs died. So, no dino list would be complete without the raptors, fierce and fleet, possessed of appetites voracious and clothed in feathers ostentatious. Although they might look soft and petable, their dining habits were regrettable. Their teeth and claws were just the thing for handy disemboweling. And if they could outrun you, then you, alive or dead, were on the menu. These charmers, science gives the word, are ancestors of every bird. So every barnyard hen that pecks might be a daughter of T-Rex. Experiments with chickens show those genes still lurk in embryo, and so we're fortunate, I figure, that chickens don't get any bigger. We might be Henny Penny's prey. Perhaps it seems a tad outré to think of chickens in this way. It's evolution. What the hey? Now, after the reptiles, when the reptiles died out, that gave us our chance. If the dinosaurs hadn't died out, there would be no human beings and probably no mammals bigger than a weasel or maybe a cat, because there just wasn't room for them. The dinosaurs had filled all the niches. But when the dinosaurs were gone, that sparked the rise of the mammals. And if I were to ask you about an Ice Age mammal, chances are that in the top 3 would be, anybody?
Woolly mammoth.
There you go, the woolly mammoth. We think of mammoths the way we think of elephants. We believe they lived in herds. Like elephants, they probably communicated with infrasound, sound that is too low for us to hear, but which we can feel. And we feel the same kind of fellowship with mammoths, I think, that we feel with elephants. There's a lot of talk of bringing the woolly mammoth back, which I think would be a mistake, because you could only bring one back, and it would be one lonely mammoth without its culture. So, we dream of mammoths. We dream of mammoths, matriarchal herds, who just 5,000 years ago were here alongside us, migrating like the birds, southward then north again with every year. We dream of mammoths and the tales they told that rumbled nightly through that ancient ground, to touch us in our sleep and to enfold our minds with mysteries in infrasound. We dream of mammoths, spirit guide and prey, both hunted and revered, whose image, set on cave walls underground and far from day, drift in that dark to haunt our dreaming yet. We dream of mammoths even though they're gone, because we know they're gone and won't return. But in the dream time, mammoths still live on, and so we dream of them and dreaming yearn. We dream of mammoths. Maybe they dream too of humans who once shared their tall grass plains. And maybe when our sojourn here is through, in dream time we will walk with them again. Thank you. When I was a shepherd, Algoma's prehistory had an impact on me with every lambing season because there is no selenium in the soil. And if you're a shepherd and you have a newborn lamb in Ontario, you need to give it a shot of selenium. If you don't, within 48 hours, it will be unable to stand and eventually it will die. It's called white mussel disease. The reason we don't have selenium in the soil is because it was all glaciated out and pushed south. Michigan has our selenium. So, about a million years ago, a series of glaciations began, back and forth, that scraped away the late layers of our history, which is why we have no dinosaur bones and no mammoth tusks, and also took the selenium out. So, 900,000 years ago, the cold crept downward from the pole, a moving face of ice whose path in process rolled. Advance, retreat, advance at snail's pace. Repeating for centuries, and as it moved, it bulldozed soil southward at its base. With pebbles grinding underfoot, it grooved long gouges in the shield's granite hide. And half an eon's history removed from plain and valley, hill and mountainside. This weight of water scraped the landscape bare. Let only ice and rock alone abide where once were hunter, prey, and wheat and tear. And when at last the glacier's long reign had ended, it retreated, leaving there its mark on stone, but nothing to remain of those who used to walk this path of old. Search for them if you will. You search in vain. Thank you. You've been just wonderful, and I really appreciate you coming out to hear my poetry. By the way, that last one was Tertsarima, which I am told is good for heavy, ponderous, slow things. So it seemed a good choice for the glacier. This last piece is the Chaucerian rhyme. It's Rime Royal, and it's common, it's customary at a suite of poems to have the last one be kind of a wrap-up and farewell. So I wrote this just for you. And what I would like you to do this summer, pick a sunny day, find a place where the rock sticks out of the earth. Maybe go down to Deborah, to the Ripple Rock, and put your back against the rock. And try to remember what this land was like before any of us were here. If you take anything away from tonight, I really hope that you take a different way of looking at Algoma so that you see some of that history that's hardly there at all anymore, but it is there. So, look up from sun-warmed granite. Here's the past, a mile of ice that backwards melts away to grassland. Herds of mammoths, low and vast, pass by and fade. Then reptiles rule, and last, fish, crinoids, and invertebrates hold sway. Before them, comet-born, a rippled mere where life first rose. The stones speak. Can you hear? Thank you.
I am a third-generation Northern Ontarian, and my notion of the Canadian character does not come from the CBC or free healthcare, but from the thick, green, indescribable smell of pine and birchwoods, of their carpets of moss and leaves and needles, of paddling a kayak across Batchewana Bay, of tapping and boiling maple syrup behind my father's cabin in Echo Bay. I don't need tourist brochures or beer advertisements or the government to confirm who I am and where I am from. Grandparents, parents, and 20 years living under the cold, clear skies of Northern Ontario told me all that I needed to know.
Leo Moore, everyone. Leo, thank you so much. Come and join us.
Sure.
This has been just so wonderful. Thank you for coming back. And one of the things that I'm going to ask you first, because I think maybe the audience might like to know, is who were you interpreting this from? Because I don't think it was you.
It wasn't. And I have a book. So the gentleman who wrote those two pieces were a part of his memoir, which we have here, which we've secured from the library. We did have copies, but apparently they sold out. So I know he's shipping some more up here, so they will be available. The gentleman's name is George Case. He is originally from Sault Ste. Marie, moved away for a number of years, and then came back to the Sault. He's now in Ottawa, and he's authored quite a few books, most notably this one, his memoir, and one about Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin. He's a big Led Zeppelin fan. So this book was written all about his childhood and his youth in Northern Ontario. It's called Arcadia Borealis.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And how do you relate to George? When you were speaking his words, how did you relate to him?
Well, as a young man who grew up in Northern Ontario, my family has been in Northern Ontario for many, many generations, so I can kind of understand where he was coming from, being, you know, as I just said, a third-generation Northern Ontarian. Some of the experiences, right? Everybody here, I think, has had some experience or another tapping and boiling maple syrup, or at least seeing Batchewana Bay. You know, maybe not potentially kayaking on it, but his words spoke to me as somebody who grew up here, who's taken the bus from Toronto to Sault Ste. Marie. I think some of us have the 12-hour death march, stopping at every, I don't want to besmirch any towns between here and Sudbury, but not populous locations. And when you're trying to get home and you're just on that last leg right before Christmas, and you're like, okay, do we really have to stop in Espanola for this? So just, he has a way with it, has a way with the words that just kind of really spoke to me and allowed me to relate to what he was saying.
That's really good. We really appreciate that. So I was wondering, we were chatting, of course, a little bit early on, Elizabeth and I, and so there was such a really nice, there was a nice bridge, if you wish, between the archaeology piece that Ian talked to us about, and then, of course, the paleontology. So were you kind of trying to figure out, you know, what might be the bridge with our friend Leo's story steeped in stone?
Do you like rocks?
I like rock music.
Close enough.
It was still stories steeped in stone and part of Algoma, which is wonderful also to have an author that was from Sault Ste. Marie originally and certainly has moved on, but has never forgotten his roots, and certainly as well has written his memoir about it, and stories that we can really relate to. And speaking of stories, I mean, I'm going to come back now to Elizabeth, because one of the things that I was totally enchanted and enthralled by how you presented your poetry. And so it just didn't come just like this overnight for you to prepare those poems just for us this evening. So can you tell us a little bit more about all that has inspired you? And
this is such a long story. My inner 4-year-old is going, me, let me. I have always been interested in dinosaurs and Ice Age mammals. I remember when I was probably in grade 5 or 6 doing a report on paleontology and drawing a mammoth on the front of it. And although my inner 4-year-old was dormant for a few years, she's back. Oh yeah, you need to see my collection of dinosaur models. But the whole idea that you don't need artifacts to tell you things about history, that if you just look at what's going on around you, if you look at the way forests grow, they have a progression from certain kinds of plants to other kinds of plants. There are plants that grow on disturbed ground, and after a few years they go away because the flora changes and there isn't room for them. So the same thing with the rocks, that if you look at the rocks, you can see history. So the bit about the glacier grinding pebbles underneath it. Now imagine a mile of ice over top of your head and grinding a pebble against another rock. It's going to leave a groove. And it's almost unimaginable, the weight of that. But there it is. If you were to put your finger in that groove, you're touching something that happened 100,000 years ago. If you put your hand on the Ripple Rock at Deborah, 2 billion years, a different continent, but still here. You know, and I thought, everybody talks about the human history as though that's the only history, but we're a blip. We're a blip in the story.
Yes, and when you speak about millions of years ago, which really goes so far more beyond that, it's almost difficult. It's really difficult to fathom.
Finite little brains.
Yes, and you just had the ability to bring us through your poetry and your writing. I really liked how you provided a little bit of an intro so that we could visualize, and we could, I could even visualize, I'm going to go a little bit off here, with the televised dinosaurs, and I know that Barney's was his 30th birthday. And,
oh, please.
You know, so all I could think about, I don't know if you thought the same thing as well out there, that the characters on TV that we might not be so enthralled about might have been Barney, but
Yeah.
but
even,
we'll forget about him. Eh?
Even Dino in the Flintstones, humans did not live concurrently with those dinosaurs. As I said, the birds, there's really good evidence that birds are theropods. So the family that produced T-Rex and the velociraptors and the oviraptors and all of those other animals were actually also turned into birds.
So you're saying my childhood was a lie?
Yes, I'm sorry. But if you take your biology from television, I'm afraid that's what you get.
Fair enough.
You should have watched the school bus. What was that?
Oh, the magic
The
school
magic
bus.
school bus? Yeah, at least you knew school buses didn't fly.
Well, Leo, would you be so kind as to, beneath George's
Oh my
book
goodness.
is a book, and I wanted to bring that out since we still have a little bit of time. So Elizabeth, you've written a number of
I've written a lot of
books.
stuff.
So here, for those of you who are here and those of you who are reaching us virtually, I'm sure if you want a copy, you'll certainly be able to contact the Old Stone House and they'll arrange for it. But Elizabeth, can you tell us a little bit about Shepherd in Residence, which is a book that you've written and is available for sale if they want to purchase one of your wonderful books?
Certainly. Shepherd in Residence started because I'm the kind of girl that if I had been interested in beer, I would have started a microbrewery and I would have been using historical recipes. And if I'd been interested in cigarettes, I would have planted tobacco, heritage breeds, of course, and learned to hand roll cigars and stuff like that. But what I got interested in was spinning. And honestly, heroin would be cheaper, just saying, maybe more damaging, and David would say definitely less work, because David did all my fencing. And so what I did was I learned to spin, and then I didn't want to just buy prepared fiber, as most of the city spinners I knew were doing. I wanted to buy a fleece. And I bought a fleece, and then I wanted sheep. I did make a little sideways step to Angora rabbits because I had nowhere to keep sheep, but when we moved up here, we got 3 elderly Angora goats and eventually acquired a buck, which you do need if you're going to breed. And then we got sheep, and I kept sheep for 10 years. At this time, I was also corresponding with Bill Richardson on the CBC, and eventually he phoned me up and said, we'd like you to be our shepherd in residence and write us a monthly letter about what's going on with your flock, which is kind of, well, I'm writing the letters anyway, so good. And then after the show was long gone, I thought there were still stories that I hadn't told. I applied for a grant, and I got a grant from the Ontario Arts Council, and wrote about the same number of stories again. Lawrence Stephen at Scrivener Press asked for the manuscript and published it, and I was floored. But it's lovely, and if you look at the cover, this is Elsie, who was one of the very first sheep we got. She was an Icelandic Romanov cross, and this is Michaela, who was our first Icelandic sheep. My gate did not look that nice.
Well, that's wonderful. And you are so passionate, and you really were able to convey that passion to all of us here this evening. It's just so wonderful. And you know what I'm going to do before? We're nearing the end of our show, but I'd like to bring Ian back as well so that we can have our old crew back here. Thank you so much for joining us. So is there anything that you would like to contribute to this wonderful group of individuals here? It's just been such a pleasure to have this intimacy on this intimate group on the stage so that we could kind of chat and get to know each other a little bit more, and for you to share that with you.
No disrespect, but artifacts are pretty cool.
Artifacts are extremely cool. I love artifacts.
Well, we were so enthralled when we saw that. I don't know about you, but did you realize that 16,000 artifacts had been found? Wasn't it just mind-boggling?
Yeah.
Well, I've been associated here with very happily with the site, Ermatinger site, for 10 years, and that was part of the research that I was floored by, because a lot of them are probably shared with the museum, and some that are in our archives that, as well. But we do have a small collection of a few hundred, and they're very small. I mean, they're not large artifacts. Our biggest artifact is the old stone house, but it was there, and it didn't need to be uncovered.
Yes.
But we do have some on display in our cellar, and that are from the 1974 dig, and a treasured piece in my pocket from 2021.
Yes, and that's wonderful, because a lot of us were still around in 1974. Some of us may not have been born yet, but it's still not that long ago. And to know that this took place right here in Sault Ste. Marie, it's quite amazing and wonderful. So again, I would like to, for all of us, again, let's give a nice round of applause to Ian, to Elizabeth, and to Leo for this evening's presentation. It was just amazing. So, well, of course, this is time for us to say goodnight. I'd like to thank you, merci, Chimigwich, to all of you here who've been such a great audience and participated and certainly seemed really enthusiastic about the presentations tonight. To those of you who are joining us virtually as well, it's been a pleasure for me. This is going to be my last time emceeing with the series Steeped in Stones, and I certainly want to acknowledge the Friends of Ermatinger Clergue. I always get this mixed up. National Historical Site, in partnership with Wendy Hamilton's Theatre in Motion, for making this series of 13 events possible. This is just quite amazing, and I think that we should give them a big round of applause. It's certainly been an honor for me, and as I had mentioned a little bit earlier on at the beginning of the show, not one show is alike. So come again, there will be more. On your tables are, again, the list of all of the future events. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug the very next one with George Houston and Jarrett Mills, which, if you give me just a second, because I did not memorize it, is, hold on, my fellows. Stones from the North, Growing Up Northern. Get your tickets now. And Come again as many times as you can or stream and tell all your friends. This is a very nice and intimate group, and we really enjoy having you with us. Have a wonderful evening. Bonne soirée.
Do you like rocks?